The millionaire, Arthur, couldn't take it anymore until the nanny, Chloe, whispered what no one dared to say. Outside, the Seattle sky was sinking into its usual shades of grey. Inside the mansion on Queen Anne Hill, a single warm light glowed from the second floor, the office of Arthur Vance, an architect once admired as the man who shaped the city. On his walnut desk lay half-finished blueprints, a half-empty glass of whiskey, and stacks of unsigned contracts. The air was heavy, almost suffocating. The rain tapping against the windows blended with the faint ticking of the wall clock, a rhythm both steady and cold. In the corner, Arthur sat motionless, pressing his hands against his temples, his tired eyes fixed on nothing. Downstairs in the nursery, the faint but persistent cries of two little girls echoed, a sound that tore through the silence like a memory he could never bury. Lily and Daisy, his twin daughters, were barely 10 months old, yet Arthur had never held them for more than a few moments. Since the day Eleanor, his wife, walked out, their cries had become the sound he feared most, a reminder of failure, of the words she'd once hurled at him. You know how to build homes for others, but not one for your own family. He closed his eyes, trying to block it out. The crying seeped through the walls, filling every corner of his mind until it was no longer sound, but heartbeat. The room seemed to stop breathing with him. Please, just stop, he whispered hoarsely. Just for a moment, please. No answer came. Only the cries continued, as if the babies were waiting for the father who never came. Arthur had once been the image of success. He designed towers that reached for the Seattle skyline, appeared on architecture magazine covers, and was called the man who turned dreams into concrete. But the higher he climbed, the emptier he became. The more perfect the buildings, the more shattered his heart. 6 months earlier, the mansion had still been bright at night, not with peace, but with arguments that never ended. In the master bedroom, Eleanor Vance stood before the open wardrobe, silently folding her clothes into a suitcase. The elegant dresses that once made her glow now looked like relics of a life she no longer wanted. Arthur stood by the door, fists clenched, his voice trembling. "What are you doing, Eleanor? Don't tell me you're leaving." She didn't look at him. Her hands kept moving, steady, almost detached. "I'm tired, Arthur. Tired of you, of this house, of pretending to be someone I'm not." "Pretending?" he echoed, stepping closer. "We're a family. You just need time." She cut him off, eyes sharp and cold. "We're not a family. We're one of your unfinished projects." The room fell into silence. Outside the window, rain fell softly over the rose garden, once planted to make her smile, now wilted like their love. Arthur tried to smile, though it hurt. "I know you're exhausted. I am too. But you just had the babies. You can't walk away like this." Eleanor gave a hollow laugh. "Babies? You say that as if you've ever looked at them. I've been busy, but I love them." "Love," she repeated, voice like ice. "You love your buildings more than anything. You love your reputation, your spotlight, your empire. This family, it's just a shadow under your success." Arthur said nothing. The words hit him like blades. She went on, her tone quieter, but cutting deep. "When I was pregnant, I prayed that motherhood would change me, that I'd feel what every woman talks about, that overwhelming love. But when I saw them, I felt nothing but fear. I felt trapped. Eleanor, you're suffering from postpartum depression. We can find help." "No, Arthur, I'm not sick. I'm just unhappy, and you can't fix that with money or status." She zipped the suitcase. The sharp sound echoed in the room. Arthur stepped forward, grabbing her hand. "I can change. I'll spend more time with you, with them. Don't leave, please." Eleanor pulled away gently, her voice soft but distant. "You don't understand. I can't stay here another day. If I do, I'll disappear." From the nursery next door came the faint cries of Lily and Daisy, as if they could sense the fracture between their parents. Arthur looked toward the door, then back at his wife. "They need you." "No, Arthur," she whispered. "They need someone who can love them, and I can't. Not like this." She picked up the suitcase, her fingers trembling for the first time that night, and walked toward the door. He tried to move, but his legs felt rooted to the floor, as if the house itself refused to let her go. "Eleanor," he called, his voice breaking. She stopped at the doorway, but didn't turn around. "You can rebuild the world, Arthur, but you can't rebuild my heart." The door closed, and with that sound, his world collapsed. For a long time, Arthur just stood there, motionless, hollow. Then, slowly, he walked to the nursery. 2 cribs sat side by side in the dim light. 2 babies cried, faces red, arms reaching for someone who wouldn't come. He reached out a trembling hand and froze midway. He couldn't do it. He was terrified he'd hurt them, fail them like he'd failed her. "I'm sorry," he whispered, tears spilling down his face. "I don't know how to be your father." He turned, closing the door quietly behind him. The crying continued, filling every empty hallway of the mansion. After Eleanor left, he hired rotating nannies and laid down one unbreakable rule: do not disturb me, no matter what happens. The mansion slowly turned into his prison. The cries of his daughters, sounds that should have meant life, now sounded like punishment. Every night he sat before his desk, pen in hand, unable to draw a single line. The lamp cast a dull glow over his worn-out face, revealing the dark circles beneath eyes that had long forgotten how to shine. Outside, the rain kept falling. Downstairs, the twins kept crying. And upstairs, a father sat in silence, trapped in a past where love had walked away and left only echoes behind. The mansion remained lit, but inside there was only darkness. As dawn pushed its first pale light through the misted window, a small bus stopped in front of the tall iron gates of the Vance mansion. Chloe Miller, 27, stepped out wearing a worn coat and faded canvas shoes. She looked up at the massive house before her, elegant, silent, and frozen in time. She tightened her grip on the strap of her bag and took a deep breath. Chloe wasn't afraid of hard work. She was afraid of silence, the kind that filled houses where people had stopped loving each other. At the front door, Mrs. Dawson, the elderly housekeeper, greeted her, a stern face softened by kind eyes. "You must be Miss Miller. I'm Dawson, the housekeeper. Come in, dear." Her voice was gentle, yet carried quiet authority. Inside, the hallway gleamed under warm lights. The air smelled faintly of perfume and bleach, too clean, too lifeless. "The master is upstairs," Mrs. Dawson said as they walked. "He doesn't like to be disturbed, especially at night." Chloe nodded. "Your job is to care for the twins, Lily and Daisy. Feed them, bathe them, put them to sleep. Everything you need is in the nursery." "I understand," Chloe replied softly. She needed this job more than anything. That evening, as the last rays of sunlight faded beyond the tall windows, Chloe began her first night shift. The nursery was neat, almost unnaturally so. 2 small cribs side by side, toys lined up like museum pieces, no trace of children's laughter anywhere. Chloe walked closer and looked at the sleeping girls. Lily with a round face and soft lips curling into a dream. Daisy with light brown hair and tiny fingers clinging to her blanket. "Hello, little princesses," she whispered. "From now on, I'll take care of you." Night fell. The wind whistled against the glass, carrying the damp chill of a Seattle rain. Suddenly, a cry broke the silence, soft at first, then rising in desperation. Chloe sat up, startled. It was 1 a.m. She rushed to the crib. Lily's face was flushed red, her forehead hot to the touch. "Oh no," Chloe murmured. "You've got a fever." The house was utterly still. She hesitated for a moment, remembering Mrs. Dawson's warning, "Never disturb Mr. Vance." But the baby's skin burned beneath her palm, and her breathing came fast and shallow. Chloe's heart clenched. She lifted Lily gently and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you." The moment she held the child, the crying stopped. Lily hiccuped once, then slowly fell asleep against her chest. The door swung open. Arthur Vance stood at the threshold, rumpled shirt, disheveled hair, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. "What are you doing?" His voice was strained. Chloe turned, still holding the baby. "She's running a high fever. We should call a doctor. Put her down." But I said, "Put her down." His voice cracked, not in anger, but in fear. Chloe didn't move. Her chaza met his calm, unwavering. "Sir, I know I'm just an employee, but I won't put down a sick child. She needs to be held. She needs warmth." A heavy silence filled the room. Arthur's face flickered. Anger, guilt, sorrow, all in one fleeting second. Then he turned away and muttered, "Do as you wish." He walked out, leaving Chloe alone with the sleeping baby. She looked down at Lily's tiny face and whispered, "Don't worry, little angel. I won't let you be alone." Outside, the rain kept falling, but in that small nursery, for the first time in months, warmth began to spread from the gentle arms of a young woman whom fate had sent here, just when this broken family needed a miracle. The next morning, the Seattle sky hung pale and gray, rain misting over the trees outside the Vance mansion. Chloe held Lily in her arms, standing by the nursery window. Outside, the world kept moving, but this house seemed frozen in time. From the moment she stepped in, she felt it. Everything here was too perfect to be alive. The hardwood floors gleamed without a scratch. The walls shone white and cold. Every toy lined up on the shelf like a museum exhibit. Even the family portraits along the staircase seemed wrong. Eleanor's smile looked flawless, but her eyes were hollow, and Arthur's gaze never truly met hers. During her break, Chloe joined Mrs. Dawson in the kitchen for tea. The older woman moved carefully, every gesture deliberate, her silence heavy with unspoken truths. "Mrs. Dawson?" Chloe asked softly. "Does Mr. Vance ever come downstairs to play with the girls?" The woman paused, kettle in hand. "No," she finally said. "I've worked here for 10 years, and I've never seen him set foot in the nursery." "Why not?" "Because every time he looks at them," Mrs. Dawson replied quietly, "he sees his pain." Her voice trembled slightly. His wife, Eleanor, struggled with depression after giving birth. When she left, he changed. It's as if the twins aren't just his daughters, but mirrors reflecting the mistakes he can't forgive. Chloe lowered her eyes, her chest tightening. She looked around the kitchen, spotless, organized, lifeless. No laughter, no conversation, no scent of family meals. Later that afternoon, while putting Daisy to sleep, Chloe heard slow, hesitant footsteps in the hallway. She turned and saw Arthur standing at the far end, watching through the open door. He said nothing, just observed for a few seconds, then quietly walked away, leaving a silence that lingered long after his footsteps faded. That morning, the rain had stopped. Rare Seattle sunlight poured through the glass windows, scattering across the hydrangeas blooming in the back garden. Chloe decided to take the girls outside, something that, according to Mrs. Dawson, no one in this house had done for nearly a year. She placed Lily and Daisy into the double stroller, wrapped light blankets around them, and opened the door leading into the garden behind the mansion. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of damp earth. Sparrows perched on the wooden fence and chirped a few short notes, as if to welcome something about to begin. "Let's have a little sunshine, my princesses," Chloe said, her voice bright as a spring breeze. Lily gave a small laugh, a tiny sound, fleeting, but enough to make Chloe's heart skip. She stopped, bent down, astonished. "Did you just laugh, Lily?" She touched the little nose gently, and this time the laugh rang clearer, pure, natural, like a small bell chiming in the still air. Daisy looked at her sister, then began to laugh, too, her bright eyes sparkling. Chloe laughed out loud. She knelt beside the stroller and began making silly faces, sticking out her tongue, puckering her lips. The twins burst into laughter, round and innocent sounds blending with the wind and the birdsong. It was the first time laughter had echoed in this garden since the day Eleanor left. On the second floor in his office, Arthur was seated at his desk. He heard something unusual, faint at first, then clearer, warm, spreading through the cold walls. He lifted his head and walked toward the window. Below, Chloe was sitting on the grass, the two girls in her arms, laughing until they leaned into her shoulders. Sunlight shimmered in their hair, creating a scene he thought he would never see again. He stood still, his hand resting on the window frame. Within that laughter, he heard something achingly familiar, the sound of life, of love, of a part of himself he thought had died with the past. Chloe lifted Daisy up and spun her around, while Lily sat giggling on a blanket of wildflowers. "Look, sweetheart, a butterfly," Chloe said, pointing at the golden butterfly fluttering around. The girls stretched out their arms, laughing in delight. Arthur found himself smiling, just a small, awkward smile, but a genuine one. He stood there for a long time, not daring to move, afraid that if he looked away, everything before him would vanish like a dream. That night, a storm swept through Seattle. Wind howled through the trees, lashing against the tall windows of the Vance mansion. Rain pounded relentlessly, as if it wanted to wash away the house's long-kept silence. Chloe had just fed Daisy her milk, and Lily was drifting into sleep in her crib, when suddenly the lights went out. The entire house was swallowed by thick, suffocating darkness. "No, no, this can't be," she whispered, fumbling for her phone. A weak beam from the flashlight cut through the dark, casting pale light on two tiny faces, now tightening with fear. "Shh, it's all right, sweetheart," Chloe soothed, though her own voice trembled with worry. A thunderclap boomed, shaking the windows. Both girls burst into tears, high, piercing cries that blended with the roar of the wind, making the room itself seem to tremble. Chloe clutched Daisy close, trying to calm her, but Lily cried harder from the crib, her face red, her little hands flailing helplessly in the air. "Oh God," she whispered, heart pounding. She couldn't comfort them both at once. Chloe ran from the room, holding Daisy in her arms, calling out, "Mr. Vance, Arthur, I need help." No answer, only the hammering rain against the glass. She ran down the hall to the study. A faint glow flickered inside, a single candle's trembling flame. Arthur sat there, his head in his hands, as if he could hear nothing but the storm raging outside. "Arthur," she gasped, "the girls are terrified. I can't calm them both. I need your help." He lifted his head. The candlelight flickered over his face, pale, exhausted, afraid. "Mrs. Dawson is visiting her daughter tonight," Chloe nearly shouted. "You're all I have." He shook his head, standing abruptly. "No, I can't. I don't know how. I'll only hurt them." Chloe stared at him, the man once admired by an entire city, now trembling like a child. "You won't hurt anyone, but if you do nothing, they'll hurt alone." He stepped back, his hands shaking as thunder rolled again. "I can't," he repeated, voice cracking. "I made Eleanor suffer. I don't deserve to touch them." Chloe moved closer, her gaze steady, her voice lower, but stronger than the storm outside. "You can run from your fear, Arthur, but you can't run from being a father." Silence filled the room. Outside, Lily was still crying, the sobs growing weaker, fading into small whimpers that made Chloe's throat tighten. She placed Daisy into his arms. "Take her." He recoiled, but she didn't let him pull away. "You are her father. She needs you right now." His hands trembled violently as he reached out. Chloe gently settled Daisy against his chest. For a moment, his arms froze. Then the baby's head dropped softly against his shirt. She hiccuped once and fell silent. Arthur looked down, eyes wide. She stopped crying. "Because she knows her father's warmth," Chloe whispered, tears glimmering in her eyes. Arthur held the little girl tighter, feeling her faint breath against his collar. From that warmth, something began to spread. No longer fear, but a tenderness he had forgotten could exist. Chloe turned to pick up Lily, soothing her until both girls slept peacefully. When she looked up again, Arthur was still sitting there, the candlelight trembling over his face where quiet tears were falling. "Chloe," he murmured, voice breaking, I didn't know that just holding them could make everything feel lighter. Because love is never a burden, Arthur, she answered softly. It's only something you've forgotten how to feel. Outside, the storm began to fade. The rain eased. The two girls slept soundly in the arms of the father they had only known through distant footsteps, and inside Arthur, something stirred, not fierce, but steady, like the birth of a promise. He whispered almost too quietly for anyone but himself to hear, "I won't run anymore." The next morning, the Seattle sky was unusually clear. Droplets still clung to the window pane, glittering in the first sunlight, and in the nursery, the soft rhythm of two little girls breathing filled the room like a lullaby. Chloe sat beside the crib, stretching her shoulders after a sleepless night. She looked at Lily and Daisy lying next to each other, their cheeks flushed pink in the morning light, their tiny hands unconsciously clasped together in their sleep. A warm smile touched her lips. The door opened quietly. Arthur Vance stepped in, holding 2 cups of hot coffee. He wore a grey sweater, his hair tousled, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Yet his gaze was different this time, no longer hollow, but gentle, alive. "I made you one," he said softly. Chloe blinked in surprise and accepted the cup from him. "Thank you." For a moment, silence lingered, broken only by the ticking clock. Arthur looked at his daughters and said, his voice quiet but warm, "Last night, I never thought I could do it, but when I held her, it felt like I was truly breathing for the first time in years." Chloe smiled. "Sometimes it just takes one moment to remember who we are." He sat down in the chair beside her, watching the 2 sleeping girls. "People always talk about love as something loud, grand gestures, big memories, but when she laid her hand on my chest last night, I realized how quiet love can be." "Quiet," Chloe echoed, "but deep." Sunlight filtered through the curtains, brushing gold across her brown hair. Arthur looked at her and something stirred inside him, a warmth so simple and steady he had thought it lost forever. She asked gently, "Have you ever told them a story?" He shook his head, a little embarrassed. "Never. I wouldn't know where to start." Chloe smiled, standing up to take a small picture book from the shelf. "Then let me teach you. Every father needs a story to tell." She opened the first page, her voice slow and melodic as it filled the brightened room. Arthur listened, his eyes softening with every word. When she stopped reading, he said quietly, "Your voice is so gentle. I see why they sleep so peacefully when you're near." Chloe chuckled softly. "I read with my heart, not out of habit." "That's the secret." Arthur looked at her, then at his daughters, still asleep, their lips curved in dreamy smiles. He murmured almost to himself, "Maybe this is what I've been searching for all along. Peace." Chloe set the book down and gazed out the bright window. "After the storm," she said, "the sky is always clearer. You just have to be brave enough to stay through the rain." Arthur said nothing, but inside he knew he had just crossed that fragile line between fear and love. Outside, the sun climbed higher, reflecting on the dew like tiny crystals, and in that small room, life, the kind the house had long forgotten, was quietly returning through each breath, each laugh, each glance. After the storm, the Vance mansion seemed reborn. No longer was it wrapped in its old, icy silence. Now it carried the soft babble of children, bursts of laughter, and the quiet sounds of a father learning how to begin again. That morning, as pale sunlight filtered through the windows, Arthur held Daisy in his arms, while Chloe prepared milk for Lily. He was clumsy, awkward, dropping a towel on the floor. Chloe laughed softly, her voice light as the breeze. "It's all right. You're learning. Everyone starts with mistakes." Arthur looked at her, embarrassed, yet strangely warmed. He had never imagined a day when he'd stand here in a kitchen beside someone caring for his own children. The memories of Eleanor still surfaced, sometimes like a scar that hadn't fully healed. But the guilt that had once consumed him now felt gentler, more distant. When Daisy giggled in his arms, for the first time, he felt something different. Not duty, but genuine joy. He touched her tiny hand, feeling the warmth spread from her soft skin. "Chloe," he said, his voice low and honest, "I'm afraid I'm not good enough. I don't know what being a father really means. I've spent too long running away." Chloe set the bottle down and looked at him for a long moment. "A good father doesn't have to be perfect, Arthur," she said, her voice warm like a blanket on a winter morning. "You just have to stay. That's what these girls need most." Her words silenced him, not because they were profound, but because they struck the place he feared to touch his own heart. In the days that followed, a new rhythm took shape. In the mornings, Arthur no longer left the house early. He began working in the ground floor study, keeping the door open so he could hear Lily and Daisy's laughter from the next room. Between online meetings, he would make bottles, change diapers, or read fairy tales in a hesitant voice. The first time Lily babbled, "Papa," he almost couldn't believe his ears. Chloe stood by the doorway, smiling, her eyes full of quiet joy. In the afternoons, they took the girls into the garden. Arthur spread out a small blanket while Chloe brought soft toys. The sunset bathed the children's hair in gold, making them look like two tiny rays of light. Arthur sat between them, steadying Daisy as she tried to stand by, holding his shoulder. She laughed brightly, and he laughed too, his voice carrying across the calm yard. "See," Chloe said softly, "just by being here, you've already changed everything." Arthur looked around. The grey walls, once filled with sorrow, now glowed with warmth and laughter. The house that had felt like a tomb of memories was alive again. The scent of alcohol and smoke had been replaced by milk, baby powder, and freshly brewed coffee each morning. Silence had given way to lullabies, babbling voices, and the steady heartbeat he thought he had lost forever. One late evening, as Chloe lulled the twins to sleep, Arthur stood by the doorway, the soft lamplight reflecting on his face. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for helping me remember how to love." Chloe turned and smiled gently. "No one ever forgets how to love, Arthur. Sometimes we just forget how to show it." She said it softly, placing a finger over Lily's small, sleeping lips. "And sometimes it only takes one tiny hand to remind us." Chloe smiled faintly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear as the twins slept between them. Outside, dawn was breaking, and inside, something new had begun to live again. The Vance mansion, after so many cold years, had finally recovered what it had lost for far too long, the sound of laughter and the warmth of love. And along with it, Arthur's heart, the heart of a man who once believed he had died in his sorrow, was learning to love again, one beat at a time. Months had passed since that stormy night. The Vance mansion was now alive with laughter and light, children's voices echoing through its halls, sunlight reaching every forgotten corner. Arthur worked from home, starting each morning by feeding Daisy, then taking Lily for a stroll in the garden. Chloe was still there, quiet but steadfast, a presence that had become part of the family. Everything seemed peaceful until one Thursday afternoon, the doorbell rang. Arthur was playing with building blocks beside his daughters when the ding-dong echoed through the grand hall. He stood, straightened his shirt, and walked to the door. When he opened it, he froze. Standing before him was Eleanor, the woman he had loved, lost, and suffered for. She was as beautiful as ever, dressed in a spotless white suit, her short blonde hair perfectly cut, her blue eyes cold. Behind her stood two men in black suits, each carrying a briefcase. "Hello, Arthur," she said with a faint, icy smile. "I've come back to reclaim what's mine." He stood in silence for a few seconds. "What are you talking about?" "My rights, the estate, and the children." Her tone was even, as if she were reading a contract. "My depression has been treated. I'm fit to be a mother again, and I want the girls to live with me." Arthur looked into her eyes. They were clear but held no warmth. "No," he said softly, then firmer. "You're not here for them, Eleanor. You're here for the money." Her smile faded. "Are you accusing me? I'm stating the truth." Light footsteps echoed from the staircase. Chloe stood on the landing, her hand gripping the railing, silently watching. She hadn't meant to intrude, but her heart tightened at the sight of Arthur, calm yet deeply wounded. "You left when they needed a mother most," he said, his voice low but steady. "Don't speak of taking back what you yourself abandoned." Eleanor let out a cold laugh. "And you think you have the right to lecture me on being a parent? You, the man who couldn't even look at his own children?" Arthur didn't react. He simply took a step closer. "I'm not perfect," he said, "but I was here every night, through every fever, every tear. I learned how to be a father, and I won't let anyone take that away from me." Behind her, the lawyers opened their briefcases and set a thick stack of documents on the table. "We'll see you in court," one of them said coolly. Chloe retreated to her room, her hand pressed against her chest. She knew this would be the second storm, but this time Arthur was no longer the man who ran from fear. Weeks later, the gavel struck in the courtroom. Eleanor sat beside her attorney, poised and composed, while Arthur sat across from her, hands clenched tightly together. Her lawyer spoke first about recovery, maternal rights, and financial stability. But when it was Arthur's turn, he spoke briefly. "I have no excuses, only proof." The screen lit up. Photos and videos appeared. Arthur feeding his daughters, bathing them, reading bedtime stories. The sound of the girls' laughter filled the room, drawing quiet smiles from the onlookers. Then came Chloe's testimony, her voice calm and sincere. "I've seen him change. I've seen him learn how to love and stop running. Those little girls need that father." The courtroom fell silent. The judge reviewed the files, then finally spoke. "Based on the evidence, full custody is granted to Mr. Arthur Vance." Eleanor lifted her head, the coldness in her eyes flickering for an instant. She said nothing at first, then rose, taking her white handbag from the chair. "Congratulations," she said softly. "It seems you finally learned how to be the father I didn't need." Then she turned and walked away, cold and graceful, just as she had the day she left that house. Arthur watched her go, no longer angry, only quietly at peace. The storm had passed, and this time it left no ruins behind, only a truth that stood firm and clear. He had truly become a father. 3 months after the trial, life at the Vance mansion had completely transformed. The walls that once absorbed silence now shimmered with morning light, filled with the laughter of children and the familiar sounds of simple joy. Each morning, Arthur brewed coffee, played soft music, and helped Chloe prepare breakfast for Lily and Daisy. The little girls were now taking their first steps, their laughter echoing through the halls. In place of the cold tapping of a keyboard came the clinking of spoons, the hum of lullabies, and laughter blending with sunlight. The house that had once been a prison of grief was now a true home. One morning, as Chloe was folding the girls' clothes in the living room, Arthur walked in holding a white envelope. "Chloe," he said, "I did something for you." She looked up, surprised. "What is it?" He smiled and handed her the envelope. Inside was an acceptance letter from the Early Childhood Education College. "You once said you wanted to study again, didn't you? I think it's time you did." Chloe stood still for a moment. Tears glimmered in her brown eyes. "You didn't have to do this." "No," Arthur said gently but firmly. "You helped me find this family again. I'm just helping you find yourself." A quiet moment passed between them, soft as a passing breeze. No confessions, no grand gestures, just a look deep enough to say everything. That afternoon, they took the twins to the garden. Sunlight spilled golden across the grass. Lily stumbled and fell, then burst into laughter. Daisy clapped her hands, cheering her sister on. Arthur ran to help Lily up, while Chloe stood watching, smiling. It was the picture of a family, not perfect, but whole enough to make one believe in goodness again. "Do you remember what I told you in the beginning?" Chloe asked softly, as the girls played with fallen petals. "That I needed to learn how to love again," Arthur replied, half smiling, half thoughtful. "Not just learn," she said. "You taught me the opposite, that sometimes love doesn't need to be spoken, only felt." He looked at her, the sunlight filtering through the trees, casting a soft golden glow across her face. "Chloe," he said slowly, "maybe all this time, you've been the one thing that never left." She smiled faintly, "Because I knew you needed someone to stay." The wind rustled gently through the leaves, and for a moment they stood in silence. No promises were spoken, but everything was understood. Mrs. Dawson sat on the bench, knitting a wool sweater, softly humming an old lullaby. "I used to fear I'd die without ever seeing this house happy again," she said. "But now I can rest easy." Arthur turned to her with a smile. "Without you, this house would never have stood." "No, Arthur," she replied. "You're the one who saved it." As the sun set, Arthur lifted his daughters into his arms and kissed each of their foreheads. "Time to go inside, my princesses." Chloe walked beside him, his hand holding hers, his face lit with a quiet, genuine smile, the kind born only of peace, love, and contentment.